welcome back to the Oneway podcast. Today I'm joined by a familiar face, Mr. Trader. Mr. Trader, how you doing, sir?
I am good, sir. Good morning. Thanks for having me on again.
Yes, sir. Well, we got a lot of important things to talk about. I wanted to touch base on the tip system and also the retreat. So, yeah.
Yes, sir. We can jump right in. So, the tip system, when you first introduced this idea to us at Rising Phoenix, we talked a lot about it. We talked a lot about it. And I know that it is something that you had on the back burner for what seemed like a very long time. Something like, how are we going to implement this? How are we going to delineate this? And how are we going to pitch this to people in a way that makes it one, make sense, but two, feel good to be part of this system. And I guess my first question to you is, what is the tip system, and how have you seen this system play out over the past couple of years that it's been implemented at Rising Phoenix?
Yeah, I think maybe we should go back a step further to address why should we
Yes.
have a tip system? Because it's not like I wanted this extra level of complexity. With everything we're trying to do with One Way, we try to strip it down to its bare essentials. We have a very limited number of colored belts because we think if there's too many colors, it people have trouble drawing deep symbolism from each of those ranks.
Mm.
And so less is more. It's the philosophy that you have with icons. It's like, simple lines, keep everything simple. So I was very reluctant to adopt this system and had it kind of milling about for a while before we ever launched it. And I would say that it's still kind of in like a alpha, beta, well, maybe more like a beta um, stage because um, it's such a revolutionary concept. It's not been ever done in any discipline that I've practiced, and I've done quite a few. But the reason why it has to happen is because the mission of One Way is so unique, and we're trying to bring together two different camps. We're trying to bring together those rope schools that are principally um, tests to see if you can meet the bar.
Mm.
If you're not tough enough on day one, you're probably not gonna stick around at a rope school. And so it's almost like basic training where it's just people wash out who aren't just qualified, and those that are qualified stick around and are in it for the long haul, that intense training. Then, elevator schools are ones where the level of intensity is very light from the start and it never really increases. And those people tend to become a little delusional about their abilities in the long
Mm.
run because they've never really been pushed. And what we're trying to do is create a very approachable intro class with our beginner classes that's approachable to anyone. Doesn't matter if you're, really overweight or old or, physically kind of uncoordinated. You'll have a place at our in our program, and we want to help you get as far down that path as possible. But we also want the people at the very top to be real athletes with very good technical ability. If it's not that way, then there's nobody to look up to, and that's what inspires the next generation. So in order to do that, at first I was just having very strict testing requirements. And when people were not living up to those testing requirements, I would have to fail them.
Mm.
And that was always a very difficult thing. I think from the parents' perspective, they were upset that their son or daughter wouldn't pass. But from my perspective, I was upset because I couldn't pass them, and sometimes I felt it
Mm.
was even harder for me to do what I had to do. And because of that, so many schools have, even though they want to have good standards, have kind of forced people through the ranks.
Mm.
And
Mm.
even though I tried to have incredible standards, I started to notice that there were people who were just kept showing up. They would just keep showing up and keep training, but they wouldn't really push their rigor any harder. And then they would go to evaluation and they would not pass.
Hmm.
And there's only so many times I can fail that person. And I was confronted with an option. Do I keep this person at like a yellow belt level for 10 years?
Right.
Or in which case they won't be here for 10 years. They'll be a
Right.
yellow
Right.
belt for 2.5 years or something, and
Then
then they'll quit, you know?
yes.
And so if I want to keep that person, which is a great individual, I mean, they're passionate about the martial arts, they love our community. I love having them in our community, and I want them to get all the enjoyment out of the martial arts that they can. And their only chance of success on kind of toughening their mind so they can tackle more intense rigor and get to a higher athletic ability is to stay with them and be patient. And so having them repeat fail exams or having them be forced to stay at a certain rank just is incredibly harsh and unproductive.
Hmm. Yes.
And so what I've decided is to create this tip system, which there are black tips. For Keller belts, there's black tips and gray tips. For black belts, there's white tips and gray tips. And the original tip system is, white or black tips on Keller belts and white tips on black belts. But we implemented this gray tip system to create sort of a half step below. And the the reason, obviously, is because we want to allow people to kind of continue advancing, provided they know their curriculum and they're trying
Hmm.
hard and martial arts means a lot to them. We're not going to be passing people who, aren't taking martial arts seriously, that aren't applying themselves. I mean, these people are applying themselves at a level that they can
Yes, sir. Hmm.
at the current moment. But what inside their mind is a 10 effort is maybe like a two effort in the mind of the greater martial arts community.
Well, and even a professional athlete, right?
Yes,
Yes, sir. Hmm.
yes. So basically, if you have a gray tip, um, I should say this. Most people probably are not going to be professional athletes.
Yes.
And the same is true. Most people will not be professional martial artists. Most people do martial arts as a way of connecting with their family, as a way of finding fulfillment, getting in shape, helping their child develop leadership life skills. But in order to, have the torch passed to you to carry on the legacy of the discipline, you have to be somebody who really knows all the moves inside and out and who has
Hmm.
the physical capability to demonstrate all of those skills. And so the gray tip system is sort of a way of keeping people motivated, but also having a very strict standard. So how it works is when you go to evaluation. Now, every one-way school can do this differently, but how we do it at Rising Phoenix Martial Arts is um, if you, well, I guess that's not super important how we do it at Rising Phoenix Martial Arts. I'll just say that as a group,
Hmm.
you evaluate, you're going to be evaluated on the curriculum of your school. And if your instructor feels that you are on the path to mastery, based on the ability that you're showing right there and then, you're going to get a black tip as a Keller belt or a white tip as a black belt. But if they feel like you are showing great effort and trying hard, but you still need to work on your fitness, or maybe there's some aspects of the martial arts that you're not getting, you may be graded as a gray tip. And that just means that you're not it's like for you personally, you're a yellow belt or a green belt, but that is not necessarily the yellow belt and green belt standard.
Hmm.
And Yes.
If I can jump in here because this is the part of the conversation that we went over so many times, and so I fully track what it is that you're saying because I had this conversation before, and something that really helped me as we were talking about this a couple of years ago was the terms recreational and professional, and to dig into that term recreational a little bit, I did some research on this recently, really just into the word, and it's built around recreation, right? So recreation is recreation. So it's something that we do for the exact reason that you said, right? Because it's fulfilling, or I get to spend time with my family, or it's something that I do because I love it and because I enjoy it and it fills my cup. It helps lift myself up for the next week or the next month or whatever it is. And to take that group of people, the recreational martial artists, and put that line in front of him that says you will never ever be, like a professional athlete, I feel like is just taking something away from that group, right? You don't go out to a recreational soccer club and scoff at those people and say, "Oh, you guys will never be professional, soccer." You say, "Oh, wow, look at how much fun they're having. That's great. I want to have fun like that too."
Mhm.
And to think about the person who may be early in their training and they've learned a set of defenses and a form, you know, it's such a disservice to that person to say, well, that's going to be your defenses and form until you're 90 years old because you cannot progress. And instead, giving them the opportunity to say, listen, I see that you're trying your best. And that's all that we're asking. So you're going to progress along the grade tip system, which, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's kind of indicating that you are a recreational martial artist. This is something that you love. You have the passion. You have the drive.
Mhm.
But compared to the professional athlete, compared to the Olympian, compared to that person on the track to mastery, you're being graded in a different kind of scale. Um, would a conversation about the bar at evaluation be helpful with this? You
So
alluded to it a
yeah,
moment
the
ago.
way that we do it at Recipes Martial Arts is we have something called the bar, and basically you get scored in all your different categories. You know, your defenses, your forms, blah blah blah. You have fitness, you have flexibility, and if any of those are below a certain score, it depends on the rank. Like as you rank up, you need a higher and higher score. But if any of those are below a certain score, then you will get a gray tip. And um, what this ends up happening is, people will do very well in their forms and their defenses and their terminology, philosophy, and all these other categories, but then they will get like a one or two in their fitness.
Hmm.
And it's it kind of empirical way that we can say, you know your stuff, but you really need to like go back and like work on your tool, which is your body. And it's that's something that's very hard to tell somebody, but an exam like that that's going to measure those things in a kind of concrete way, um, sort of ensures that the standard is a standard. When you were talking, it reminded me of a conversation I had with Grandmaster Abel,
Hmm.
and he was talking about um, how for him a black belt is based on someone's personal potential. So
Hmm. Hmm.
he was talking about how he had a student had no arms and, would have to write with a pen in their mouth and did martial arts, and he promoted a black belt. And I said, that's a wonderful thing. I mean, what a beautiful thing that this person who has no arms has found, meaning in the martial arts, and that we've been able to help them find that meaning
Hmm.
and develop their body in whatever ways they can. And that's a big goal of not only my school, but I think, schools across the country that are teaching
Easy.
martial arts. But what I would kind of counter that mindset is that is that is that is wonderful inside the school, but externally, people might not feel right about that.
Mm,
Like people who are in the school who see that person every day and see all the hard work and effort they're putting in will be like, yeah, that person's a black belt. Like I've seen them out here every day right next to me. Like they deserve it. But the person at the other school, who's your competitor, your rivals, are
mm,
going to say, oh, you
mm.
got a bunch of people without arms that are black belts. And I know that sounds really harsh. I don't mean it that way, but like that's how they're going to
Right.
view it. And so what the grade tip system allows us to do is it says, if you have a grade tip, you're being graded on your personal potential. If you have a black tip, you're being graded on the standard.
Yes,
That's
sir.
really the difference. Um, the standard increases. So to get a black tip on a yellow belt is a lot easier than to get a black tip or a white tip on a black belt. It increasingly becomes more challenging. But the idea is that if you have a black tip, you're kind of on the path to becoming a master instructor.
Mm, yes, sir. Something that you mentioned to us as this system was first, appearing on the mats was these are the people who really carry um, almost like the technical honor of the discipline forward, right? Like when you look at the epitome of a martial arts athlete, this is kind of the model of the person who's on um, the black tip or the white tip system or on the path. And like you said, that's the ratcheting bar. We talked a little bit about the pyramid school and how,
Mhm.
of course, anybody can join and be part of this. But as you move up, the rigor increases, the rigor increases, the rigor increases. And I think this system is such a beautiful solution to the rope school problem. If we imagine an image of the rope, I don't know what kind of rope you imagine, but I imagine that scene from Sidekicks with Chuck Norris, where they're climbing up the rope and the kid looks over and they're climbing together. And I imagine if that rope is the school, the pile of like debilitated people at the bottom of the rope who are just like, this is awful. I hate climbing ropes. I hate this so much. And you know what? I don't even want to ever look at another rope. And they all walk away and they go away.
Mhm.
And it's great. You've got that one person at the top of the rope and they're like, oh, I feel so good up here. Right. But then they look down and they're like, there's nothing holding me up. Like, oh, okay, well now I'm at the top of the rope, but I've like lost everybody along the way. And
See,
the yes, sir.
well,
Well,
I'm sorry, I'm jumping in. Finish your thought.
I was gonna say, but the grade tip system allows you to climb that rope and keep the rest of your community right there with you, right? It's that extra little hand that says, hey, we're all moving up together, but we're all moving at different paces, right? And it gets into that larger idea of the universal metric, the idea of being able to look at anybody from any school, from any country, wherever you're coming from, and say, okay, you don't even realize it yet, but you're part of this. You're part of this system. And if I gave you a test right now, you would fit in somewhere to our martial arts system. And I think that is such a beautiful, like powerful thing that this allows us to bring forward.
Yes, sir. Um, yeah, as you were talking, I had a profound idea, but I've now forgotten it.
We were talking about climbing ropes, people at the bottom of the rope.
Yeah. So, I've met some people as I've been rolling out the system and bringing people into the fold one way that, have been kind of wondering, is this really necessary? And
Mm,
um, what I've encountered is that people who have rope schools and elevator schools, they tend not to realize, see why this is necessary. Because, like, let's say if you have a rope school, then everyone's pre-qualified from the beginning. Like,
Yes.
everyone's basically able to do it. And so all the people that I'm talking about have already walked away. You haven't even seen them.
Yes. Yes.
And all of the elevator schools are they don't see any higher level of rigor that's necessary. And so they're oblivious to that. It's like you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so the reason why we're seeing this necessity is because we are striving so hard to get people who would in any other context would not be able to get to where we want them to go, and we're trying to push them up there every way we can. And what we're realizing is people are kind of a little delusional. They're like, "Oh yeah, I'm this rank." It's like, yeah, you're that rank because you've been on the mats for that long and you put in that many hours, but you really need to work on your fitness still. And I think maybe you were the one who told me this, or somebody I was talking to was like, "Well, you wouldn't." It's great to promote people based on their personal ability, or personal potential, but you wouldn't want somebody to be a doctor based on their personal potential. You'd want someone to be a doctor based on their
Right.
ability to be a doctor, especially someone like a brain surgeon or something, because they could kill somebody.
Yes.
And the same
Yes.
is true when you're talking about passing on the knowledge to the next generation.
Mm,
If the person who is passing that knowledge on is not like completely competent, then we're gonna have a bad game of telephone.
this is
That's why this is so
something,
important.
that notion of the real the real implications of what it is the martial arts have to teach that I feel like goes over so many people's heads. And I think that people who have been in a sparring match, even one, have a little bit of an idea of like physicality, okay, okay. And the deeper you go, the more acquainted you get with risk and physical risk and like, wow, okay, there is a lot to protect here. And when I hear you compare, a professional master level martial arts instructor to a doctor, I nod my head like, yes, 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 yes. And this might be a great topic for another whole episode. But I think so many people are so disconnected from what it is that martial arts instructors actually do that they would hear that and be like, oh, this person's comparing being a martial artist to being a doctor. And again, for us, it's like, yes, yes, you don't, right, what you just said, you don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
And this is a little tangent, but this is why I'm so excited to get back into the podcast, because this is the conversation that is like
Mhm.
happening um, at different levels and different degrees at schools all over the country, at studios all over the country. And it's the conversation that needs to be brought out into the public sphere so that people can start to see how all martial arts are related and how all martial artists are related, and see that, wow, okay, right, within the community of the elevator school, yeah, it seems like nothing is the matter, right? We all love each other, we all respect each other, we all show up, we do class, it feels great. In the community of the rope school, same thing. Yeah, maybe it's a little bit different, a little more rugged, a little more hardcore, but yeah, these are my training partners, this is my band of warriors. But we have taken, and I feel like I've learned so much of this from you, we are able to create a third perspective outside of both of these realms and say, wow, you both think you're doing the same thing, but you're doing something very, very different. And to be able to take those and say, how do we bridge the gap? How do we create the conversation in the system that allows both of those camps to look at each other and bow respectfully and say, wow, we're all martial artists, we're in this together. Um, let's talk about rank. Let's talk about what level you are at or where you're going in your martial arts career, or maybe you just love to show up and work out. Like it doesn't have to be um, like you said, the professional athlete path is not the path for everybody, but on the path, there's room for everybody, which is something really profound and amazing that I feel like I found in the martial arts through the way that you've taught it to us and my peers. Um,
I would just add one last thing before
yes.
we transition, because I think we do should probably try to get to the retreat a little bit. But the standard for achieving your fourth degree black belt and becoming a master in one way, while very high, I'm not trying to make it sound like you have to be like some absolutely jacked,
Yes, yes,
guy
yes.
in his like, prime of his life, and you just destroy anybody and you're like some UFC fighter. That's not what I'm saying. But the standard, there is a standard, you
Yes.
know. In my mind, the standard basically is a paragon of fitness in his 60s or 70s, because we have to include those people. So if you can think about, like, I know a couple people who do jujitsu who are in their 60s and 70s who are very athletic. They're kind of sinewy, but they're athletic for their age, and they're mobile, and they have an incredible grasp on all the fundamentals.
Mm, mm,
Um, and so, even though they probably couldn't beat like a lot of young buck guys, in their 20s who are maybe like, purple belts even, experienced because they're so much older, like 60s and 70s, that level of fitness and knowledge is kind of what we're looking at for like a minimum entry to a 4-3 black belt in
mm,
one way, where, you know, you don't have to be some super jacked guy, but you need to be able to do, like full push-ups and full sit-ups, and I think that's a benchmark that everyone can achieve at any age. I've seen 75-year-old men do like one arm pull-ups at the park. I've seen this on YouTube. I've seen this actually in real life. Um, I used to work out at the Klotsky Center when I was at UWM, and there was these two guys who've been working out there since they were in college, and they were like in their 70s, and they were pumping more iron than I was, and I was like,
the
man,
legends, yes,
crazy,
sir.
So we want the standard to be possible at, it doesn't matter if what your sex is or what your age is. It is possible, whatever that entry level standard is, but there needs to be a uniform standard externally that people can say, "Yep, that's what a one-way black belt looks
Mm,
like,
mm.
and that's what a black tip or a white tip symbolizes." A gray tip is your personal journey based on how much time and effort you put into it.
What does it look like for someone who has a great tip? Maybe they've tested, they are promoted to the next rank with a great tip, they didn't quite meet the bar. Are they stuck there? Are they stuck there forever?
No, I mean, all it really means is that when you line up if you're a second merit yellow belt and you have a gray tip, you're going to line up behind somebody who's a second merit yellow belt who has a black tip. And it's just a half step down. And it means that um, you have to go along the standard minimum promotion requirements of time and attendance. However, if you have a black tip, you can have slightly expedited promotion. And that's because you're showing that physical aptitude for it. But at any time, and this is very important, this is very important. At any time, you can reevaluate and change your tip killer.
Mm, mm,
So you're never stuck where you are. And we feel like that is absolutely essential, because what we hope and what we see is that people, start going through the ranks. We like to say that almost everyone will gray out at some point. Although my hope is that that is not true. My hope is that every single person that comes to that door becomes a master instructor.
Mm,
But the truth is, if we're going to be honest, like probably not everyone will be able to get there. This is not, if you want to be a master instructor, this has to be your life. Like you have to dedicate your life to this, and not everyone's willing to make that level of sacrifice. But as you're going up through those ranks, you'll probably gray out at some point. And when you gray out, it will be a moment of clarity.
mm,
Okay, this is
mm,
where I'm at. Like I'm really mentally, with my mental rigor and physical fitness, I'm kind of at like a green belt. And I'm going to plateau here unless, I mean, I'll still be able to go up, earning gray tips, but I'm not going to be able to get back on that master path unless I change my mindset.
mm,
And what we see is that to have that kind of fundamental mindset change is not something you're going to do in 2 weeks. Like people will
right.
evaluate and then
Mm,
they're like, oh, I didn't get it. I should reevaluate, and you can, but it's probably not going to be that different in 2 weeks. If you can't even do a full push up and you have to do like 20 of them, you're not going to be able to do that like tomorrow. You're going to be able to do
mm,
that in 2 years. And so what the gray tip system allows you to do is you gray out for a time and you continue up at a slightly lower standing. And then when you over that time, you're changing your mindset, you're changing your fitness. And then eventually you re-emerge into those echelons. That's what we hope for all of our students, and that's why that's the beauty of the grade tip system. Is it's not a firm like wall. It's like a net that kind of slows you down a little bit, but also kind of encourages you to ratchet up the rigor.
mm. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And there are just so many examples already of this not just being a theory, but it works. It works. Even when I was at Rising Phoenix, I saw it work with a handful of students who they got their great tip, and you just saw the look in their eyes
Mhm.
change, and they said, "No, nope, I'm coming back. I'm going to do what I need to do." And they tested, and they were promoted to black tip again. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding there. Like it was like, okay, okay, this works, and it encourages people, and it doesn't discourage people if they come at it with the right attitude. So,
Yeah. What we found is that when you remind people of where they're at, they actually don't get discouraged as much as they get inspired to train
mm,
harder.
yes, sir. I think maybe one more point to add to that before we transition to the retreat, because I think this will bring us into the retreat, is I was just talking with my wife about how grateful I am to have trained under both you and Master Sanok, and to see how different your teaching styles are, how different your expression of the martial arts is, and Master Sanok's expression of the martial arts is. But, but differences aside, there is a similarity, and the similarity is the expertise. The similarity is the approach to technique. It's like all of these things that go into the bar, that go into the rigor,
Hmm.
that just makes me so excited to meet more and more martial artists as my journey continues, and be able to say, "Wow, so that's how you do things." Wow, like that's so. I never would have thought of that. I was thinking recently. I'm not going to share this individual's name, but I was thinking recently when we were at a competition together, and we were talking to um, a high-ranking person within this organization, and they were telling us this story, and then before I knew it, their fingers were in my mouth, and they were grabbing they were grabbing onto
I think I know
my
who we're
bottom
talking about.
teeth. They were grabbing my bottom teeth because they were talking about ripping parts of people off, and I was like, like
Yes, sir.
fingers in my mouth, like, like, yes, sir, like, thank you, sir. And after that interaction, I was like, wow, people do things differently, right? Like I was like, man, that was exciting. That was kind of wild, but it was just that moment. I love those moments of meeting other martial artists and saying, oh, okay, so this is your expression of the martial arts. And just because you're doing something differently doesn't mean you're any less of a master. It doesn't mean you're any less of an expert practitioner. And um, it just makes me so excited to see the way all of this is coming together and to transition here. That's what makes me so excited to go to the retreat every year. You know, for the past it's going to be 5 years for me, maybe four. That's crazy. But to see over these past few years of the retreat, like more and more people coming into the fold and more styles and histories and stories and just ways of being a martial artist all coming together on the mountain. I wonder if you could share a little bit about the one way retreat and why it's so important to the discipline and what it is that we are trying to accomplish with one way.
Yeah, so the one-way retreat sort of manifest almost incidentally because I had a piece of land up in Vermont that had been passed down to me from my grandfather, and we wanted to use it, for our dreams. And so I decided to start running a martial arts camp up there. And then as we started to develop One Way, it seemed to make sense to make that camp into like a one-way focused camp. So rebranded it the One Way Retreat. And as we've been developing the One Way Retreat, it's just been the most amazing beginning experience into One Way because
Mm,
it's hard for me to kind of pass my culture to somebody with like a seminar or class. But when I can be with you night and day for 8 days and we're training 8 hours a day and some, um, the experience is way more than skin deep, and
mm,
it can be transformative and can really help me pass on that discipline culture. And the one way retreat is kind of like our clan moot. It's like our gathering of clans. And up there on the mountain, that's where we like to do our biggest promotions. Um, it's something we want people to look forward to every year. When I lived in Korea, I trained, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, as is very typical of people in my, like serious martial artists over there in Korea. But it's something very uncommon over here in the West. And the reason is because you
mm,
can't go to
mm,
college for Taekwondo. There aren't high schools and elementary schools and middle schools that are like boarding schools where you can go and you can just focus on your sport, like Taekwondo being a sport.
mm,
Um, and so it's actually kind of hard for Westerners to train that hard. So the retreat provides that opportunity. Maybe it's only for 6 days, but at least you get a taste of what that experience is like. And most people leave the retreat all beat up and ragged, but it's an important reset to kind of to build your passion, build your fire for the next year.
yes, sir.
And
Yes,
every
sir.
time I see people come back from their retreat, after a couple months of recovery, they are kicking and punching way faster and stronger than they were before. And their knowledge of the martial arts is deeper. So, um, for us, the retreat it's more than just a camp. It's an expression of the discipline.
Mm,
It's
mm,
a introduction to the way to the culture. And I encourage everyone to come give it a try. The things we do up there are more than just instructional. Like you'll learn everything. You learn striking, grappling, weapons, more. Um, Every day you'll get up at the crack of dawn and run to the top of the mountain, do breathing exercises and meditation, work on your stalking as you come back to breakfast. I mean, it's a really cool experience. But then you'll also, encounter some of these rites of passage that I can't tell you about. You have to experience it yourself. And they'll put some hair on your chest and they'll remind you of, they'll take you to your lowest lows and build you up to your highest highs.
Hmm.
And through that experience, you'll be bonded with your peers in a way that I've never seen, in other schools and programs that I've been a part of. Um, I can very confidently say that the friendships that are built in the programs that I've run, including the retreat, are the deepest I've ever seen in the martial
Hmm.
arts world.
Hmm.
And I think the people that come off that mountain, I mean, I know so, just by sort of testimony and seeing what people are doing. People are now traveling to schools because they want to hang out with their friends.
Yes.
You don't really see that in a lot of other retreats. So,
To just share about my experience a little bit as someone who is kind of in a unique position out at the retreat, the past couple of years being a participant, and then in the past couple of years being our camp counselor. Um, I can't talk about the retreat without smiling. I can't talk about the retreat without laughing. I can't talk about the retreat without like drifting off into some daydream of some crazy thing that's happened in the past few years. And the way that something I wanted to touch on today is what Oneway feels like. And I feel like what you just said um, really speaks to this. I wrote it down. You said, the experience of the retreat is way more than skin deep. It's an introduction to the culture, it's an expression of the discipline. And something that maybe I don't know how many of my peers have experienced this because I don't know if I've articulated it in a way that I'm going to try to do now. But I think it is a common sentiment, at least at a certain, I will say, a certain level of appreciation for our art, and not just our art one way, but the martial arts as a whole, and what it means to be a practitioner of anything. And it's something that you have shared with us so many times that I've really internalized. And it is the idea that the uniform never really comes off. It's the idea that the belt never really comes off, right? I mean, it's on my retreat shirt that I got last year. On the back, it says, it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle. And I think what just opened so many doors for me during my first retreat experience that I shared about in my testimonial was that I went into the retreat maybe competitively. I thought this is me versus whatever this thing is. This is me versus this experience. And I left the retreat that first year sharing in my testimonial that, wow, this is about finding where you fit in. And not just in the martial arts, but in the whole world, like in your life, right? Where do I fit in? That's what that mountain experience has to offer you, the general you. But that's what I have found up there so many times going up, and what I've heard echoed in everybody's experience is like, wow, it just really unlocked something deep in my spirit and in my soul, and connected all of these lines that I thought were separate. Is this what it feels like to be a martial artist, right? And when we're on the mountain, you know, if I talk about it too much, I'm going to totally break down. But we had a really very just kind of crazy, profound experience last year with Mr. Oni. And I will never forget him standing among us in the center of that circle and saying, this is what it means to me to be a martial artist. Him coming back after that experience, him standing among us and saying, "Oh, you thought I was gonna quit?" And we were all like, "Oh my!" It totally lights me up because in that moment, it was total connection, total connection. There were no lines between schools. There was no division. There was no, oh, I do this better. He does this better. She does this better. It was, that's a martial artist. That's a martial artist. And that's, wow, that's what we're doing here. Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Um, I feel like I could just talk on and on about the retreat, but
Well, it's such a great expression of the warrior ethos that we're trying to pass on through Oneway, and him getting up there and saying those things just reinforce that people are getting it. And
yes, yes,
I
indeed.
think the retreat allows you that opportunity to both learn it and express it.
Mm, absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, we've gone for quite a while, and we try to keep these around an hour. So,
Yes, sir.
um, any final thoughts? We could keep going on. There's a lot more I feel like we can talk about with One Way, and I think we're gonna have to keep circling this topic,
Mm.
for perpetuity. And this will not be the last time we talk about the tip system or the retreat or any of the things that we talked about last week. But any final thoughts for our community before we sign off?
I think in terms of the overview episodes, this two-part thing that we've put together here to introduce the One Way podcast, maybe one final thought I'll leave is the more that we talk about these things, the clearer they become. The potential for clarity becomes more and more and more. And it's the same thing like we have the elevator school, we have the rope school, and they are existing in a bubble. They're existing in a sort of complacency that says, yeah, I'm safe here, I'm secure here, this is good. And it can be really intimidating and kind of scary to have somebody come up and say, I'm popping your bubbles, right? And now you are just out in the open. You're out in the open and trying to make sense of, wait, well, how am I connected to that person? How am I connected to this? But to be able to share these conversations and ideas that we have been having over the past few years and to be able to ask you questions about, oh my, I just have so many questions to continue exploring with you, sir. The conversation that I hope happens around this podcast is going to totally change the way that we talk about the martial arts, not only in my life personally with my friends and my family, or in your life, but in those people's lives and in just rippling circles out and out and out and out and out. And I'm excited to approach the day where somebody comes up to you or me and says, hey, have you heard about the One Way podcast? And we get to go, oh my gosh, wait, that's us. Like, yes, yes, it made it back, the feedback loop. So that is maybe a wish for
Oh,
this
it's coming.
podcast.
It's coming.
Yes,
So,
sir.
all right. Well, let's keep training hard, guys,
Yes,
and we'll
sir.
catch you on the next one. If you enjoyed that podcast, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as hitting the notification bell.